for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. You are aware that, do you know what just came to mind? I recall when I was listening to briefings delivered by Mr. Mark Lowcock, for example, on Yemen or on Libya. And the tone and the submission of information on these issues is quite different, quite distinct from what we hear when Mr. Mark Lowcock delivers briefings on Syria. Did that not appear to be the case to you? It appeared to me to be the case, and this is not the first time that I fell under this impression. As is always the case today, we've heard another share of invectives against Syria and the Russian Federation. Colleagues have scattered figures, quotes, emotionally charged testimony. Incidentally, we are aware of the cost of such emotionally charged testimony. We remember when the Western-led media outlets, including, for example, the New York Times, showed the tragedy of Almanak Dirshe, a child from Aleppo. However, after the release of Aleppo, it turned out that this was fake, and this was subsequently confirmed by Amran's parents. Today, my British colleague accused the Russian Federation of mockery of the Security Council. I do not wish to transform today's meeting into a competition, and I don't know where she saw the mockery, but let's recall the mockery over the Security Council by those countries who became accustomed to accusing the Russian Federation of this. The purpose, the goal of all these calls and these invectives is that is absolutely clear to us. The goal here is to sustain a terrorist presence in Idlib, and in the future to use this presence for the purposes of combating the legitimate Syrian authorities. This happened each time when the end of another terrorist enclave in Syria was closed. That's happened with eastern Aleppo, in eastern Ghouta, and now the propagandistic machine is firing full artillery around the situation in Idlib. What is happening is fully clear to us, and don't be those people who yield to this provocation. Don't be so naive not to understand what genuinely stands behind those appeals which we're hearing today. To sustain a terrorist enclave in Idlib, that is the main goal that is being adhered to by our Western colleagues. The conduct of today's meeting is indeed a complicated time, and it affords us another opportunity to shed light on a genuine situation around the humanitarian situation in Syria. The real humanitarian situation in Syria was the subject of a briefing by the Russian Defense Ministry on 29 July. That was yesterday. Our defense agency, in the spirit of openness, always invite accredited foreign colleagues accredited to Moscow to attend these briefings. But if they once again demonstrated a lack of interest in shedding light on the truth, and if they fail to attend this event, today we will briefly describe to you its content. I think that part of what has been set out in this briefing is a response to the questions of my British colleague, who does enjoy putting forward questions in this hall and frequently using the tone of a prosecutor. As was stated by previous speakers, the situation within and around Idlib indeed is a source of concern, but not in the context as is being conveyed in fake reports, but rather to the scaled-up attacks by terrorists from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, attacking civilian population and using civilians as victims in their criminal provocations. The jihadists have stepped up military capacity by increasing the number of means of attack of foreign manufacture, including lethal devices and MRLS systems. Mark Lowcock modestly failed to mention how many civilians died as a result of those attacks conducted by the terrorists. The humanitarian situation in Syria remains a subject of speculation. An appalling example of this was the recent information about the alleged 22 July, allegedly was conducted by the Russian aerospace forces, the attacks against the market and adjacent region of Marat al-Numan in Idlib province. But I will take the liberty of reading out some quotes from the briefing from the Defense Ministry. On 22 July, what was based in the UK, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, with a reference to the so-called white helmets, reported attacks by Russian aerospace forces targeting the Al-Hal market and the adjacent neighborhoods in Marat al-Numan in Idlib province. As a result, allegedly, dozens of civilians died. The accusations were quoted by European media outlets and even representatives of Western countries' leaderships and certain international organizations. The market to which is being referred, it can easily be located on a map of the area, and it has been located on the geo maps. Russian air assets in that area on 22 July was not used and was not flying over the area to verify reports about the destruction of the market in Marat al-Numan on 24 and 26 July. Russian unmanned aerial vehicles twice conducted visual imagery of that area and adjacent territory. So after, allegedly, the airstrikes were conducted. I would request that you look at the screen, says the leader of the briefing. As you see on the images from objective oversight sources, there's a full absence of any indicators of the destruction that inevitably would have been there had the area been subjected to an airstrike with the use of 6 bombs. This is confirmed by imagery from the Russian cosmic spaces in 25 July, as well as video imagery, which was done directly at the market of Al-Numan, which we received the day before yesterday. As we see on the images, the allegedly destroyed market is still operational. We regret the fact that representatives of eminent international bodies and organizations once again are falling victim to easily verifiable deception by terrorists using the fake news and unverified reports to corroborate unverified accusations. End of quote. However, this lies now the main leitmotif of today's meeting. Distinguished colleagues also had an opportunity to familiarize themselves with information circulated by the Syrian authority by an area about a video recording with white helmets practicing for another staged chemical attack in Amarak. It's a good thing that at least this duplicity was foiled by the fact that the data was received. In this connection, yet again, we would call upon the UN Secretariat and specialized UN bodies not to hastily uncover unverified information. The data needs to be taken from verified apolitical sources. They need to be cross-checked. Today it was said that the Russian Federation deliberately is conducting airstrikes using bombs targeting hospitals and schools. This is a lie. I reiterate this. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in Syria, there's a Center for the Reconciliation of Opposing Sides in operation in Syria. We repeatedly proposed that many, including Mark Lowcock, liaise with them and through them to verify information about the alleged deconflicted areas attacked by us. That too is a lie. This needs to be done instead of scattering facts, so-called facts about the Security Council that are based upon dubious sources and not directly verified sources, contrary to what is told to us. Moreover, as we repeatedly said previously, I cannot recall neither a statement from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights nor from OCHA about the principles of precaution and distinction when the coalition razed such cities to the ground as Raqqa, Hajin, or Mosul. Why is it that then nobody said anything about that? I recall this each time, but still we have not received information about that. We have long been talking about the need to end the use of double standards regarding developments in Syria, attempts to shield for terrorists in Idlib, shielding them for some kind of a hidden agenda or for engagement in a political process as a local authorities no longer withstand any criticism. If somebody forgot, I would remind them that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a terrorist organization, Jabhat al-Nusra, which simply changed its name. Its noble so-called fighters, good, kind fighters, Mark Lowcock recalled them mentioning residents in Idlib are terrifying local civilians, and they are using civilian, including medical infrastructure, for military purposes. They are using civilians as human shields. At the same time, the need to combat terrorism is explained by the legitimate presence beyond the Euphrates. The illegitimate presence, this points to the need to uphold Syrian sovereignty and territorial integrity. And again, this is an appalling example of double standards. A great deal today was said about hospitals. figures were invoked. For example, Madam Sirkin mentioned that of 46 attacks targeting medical facilities in Idlib, they were able to corroborate only 15. The methods that the organization uses to confirm the attacks not being on the ground is a different question. But look yourselves, it turns out that 2/3 of the reports which you received turned out to be fake. And we are very troubled by the fact that the circulation of these fakes are included in the United Nations structures as well. Prior to military operations in Syria, in Idlib, there were only 12 hospitals. Where did the figures come from about the quantity of hospitals, which today both UN representatives and member states and representatives of NGOs recall today, and not just today? The number of hospitals that allegedly were destroyed were not present in all of Syria taken together? Or do you believe that any area where wounded fighters are being treated, do you consider any such areas as to be hospitals? Sir, we believe it is necessary not to sweep up, not to overlook the situation in areas not under Syrian government controls. On the maps of humanitarian organizations, these are white stains, not because everything is okay there. The area beyond the Euphrates lies in ruins. There's no electricity, no water. Medical assistance is not reaching the residents there. According to our military personnel, in June and July, there were over 300 terrorist attacks there. In the Rukban IDP camp, the situation remains difficult. However, thanks to the efforts of the Russian Center for the Reconciliation of Opposing Sides in the Syrian government, more than 17,000 people were taken out of that area. We intend to continue in liaison with the United Nations and the ICRC to continue to ensure that refugees can return and to provide them with everything that is necessary. Turning to the Al-Hol camp, there, the situation is indeed catastrophic in connection with limited access for humanitarian agencies and a lack of financing, and half of the people there are women and children. This is what people should be concerned about if we are talking about the humanitarian situation in Syria. We continue to be troubled by the situation on the eastern bank of the Euphrates and illegally occupied by the United States, a Tanf zone. The Geneva Conventions were mentioned here. I wish to recall that the occupying power bears responsibility for the population on the occupied territory, and this in line with the Geneva Conventions. However, for some reason, the U.S. is not too eager to provide Rukban camp with what is necessary for the people there. We are troubled greatly by the information about major armed units being prepared. They are being deployed to Sueda, Palmyra, and Abu Kemal. Sir, by way of conclusion, I wish to stress that the Russian Federation remains unchanged. We will continue to spare no effort to restore peace in Syria, both nationally and as a permanent member of the UN Security Council and as a participant of the Astana Troika, through which more was done, this I recall once again, more was done than in any other format to achieve de-escalation and to eradicate the terrorist threat and to expand humanitarian assistance and for the advancement of the political process. We shall continue to work jointly with Turkey under the Sochi Memorandum dating 17 September 2018. We call for our efforts not to be obstructed through the establishment of political cover for terrorists and provocations. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for